every week we do a program that I think is relevant and relevant to right now. If we just talk about history, people don't really know how it applies. Like, that was a great history lesson, but what does it really matter? So we take these challenges that are happening right now. So this was very lighthearted. So this is last week. Portrayal of Asians in Hollywood. It's getting better, right? Let's talk about it. So we talked about a lot of the shows on Netflix and Prime and some of the movies who are talking about, who have Asian leads or Asian characters, and how it is getting better. One of the things brought up by one of the Asian gentlemen there is like, oh, it was an Asian male lead or is Asian woman lead, but it's the white guy lead, or Asian halfy, an Asian who's half white. And so it's like, it's getting better, but there's still obviously challenges. All these are recorded from now on. We talked about the fetishization of Asian women and what that means. And I do want to do another one of these where we have all Asian women and we're just talking, just really unfiltered with each other. It was just mostly me and it was pretty good, but I think it'll be better to hear like 6 Asian women talking about it and how it affects us daily. Environmental racism, usually this is around Black folks, Indigenous, etc. But I wanted to bring it to share that Asians, of course, are impacted by this, and the examples of environmental racism in Chinatown, Seattle included, New York, Philadelphia. The nature of this one, silence is compliance, the impact of silence on Asians. This is a really good one to watch and share with everyone, because this is why I started Asian Allies, because my network, primarily white, was not there for me and is still not there for me. And I needed somebody to be there for me. I'm an extreme extrovert. Plus, I needed people to help out and let others know, hey, Asians are being attacked. We need to do something, and how to proactively do something. I wasn't particularly plugged into the Asian community at this time. I was maybe 15 years ago. And so this really talks about white silence and how that has such a big impact. And I'm not the only one. This is, I would say, rather universal to many Asians in the US. So again, these are all recorded on YouTube. And you will recognize Kevin Henry, who's there on a call with us now. And we're doing a program for City of Shoreline. Everybody is welcome to this. And we'll be talking about looking through cultural lenses and how we see things differently and how everybody sees them differently. And it's important to be able to look at and take in before we navigate our next steps. So these are the couple of things we do. And many resources that I usually don't mention on my website, 𝗔𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀.com. It's in the chat. This is my YouTube. And so all those videos are here, along with another 200 other ones. On Instagram and Facebook, that's where I am as well, 𝗔𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, and LinkedIn. And on my website, there are a ton of resources. And I share this with you because there are many people, and perhaps you want to learn more about being Asian inclusive. So here are modules I put together where there are videos of smart people talking about Stop Asian Hate. Why is it? Why is it happening? What can you do about it? Other topics, lack of Asian representation. And we hit like 6-10 different resources talking about Yellowface, for example, and their audio, articles, and videos. Here on the listen tab, this is podcasts that I listen to a lot of them, and you hear Asian Americans talking. And I think this is a different experience. I've never heard this before until the last 2 years. And it is so comforting and exciting to hear Asians. And what I have found is, oh, I am more Asian than I thought. There's a lot of connection points. Also on the website, there's a lot of trivia or just topics. Why is a name important? And so we have P&G, who did a beautiful job of explaining in a 2-minute video to the daughter who has a Korean name of, she's going to be teased, but it's important. It's part of the meaning of you. It's just heartwarming. And there's a number of different articles and videos explaining how important the name is and how to get it right. If there's a particular topic that you're interested in, then you can click on one of the hashtags and say, oh, I'm interested in education, and then pull up articles with that. And then on Facebook, Asian Allies, there is also guides. So it can lead you through how do you learn about the model minority myth, and the bamboo ceiling. So there are the guides on this tab. So there are a ton of resources that I hope you will share and learn about. All right. Well, welcome everybody else to the call. Let's talk about U.S. history because a lot of people don't know about the Asian part. So when did the first Asian arrive in the U.S.? I bet you none of you knew that it was 1587. It was Filipinos. So a lot of people don't know this. This is the oldest house in St. Malo. This is in New Orleans. And this is where the first Asians lived. And this was the Filipino settlement. And I just watched this really heartwarming video of the first Filipino settlement in 1763. And it was neat to hear. This was a dedication in 2019, and to hear the stories of the people who lived there. It only took 256 years to get this historical marker. It's never too late. It meant a lot for the people, for the lineage that is still here. Chinese railroad workers. Can somebody phrase my sentence for me? Okay.
What fraction of the labor that went into the railroad construction was performed by Chinese laborers?
Boom. Thanks.
Yeah, that was good.
Thank you, John. Go ahead and put it in the chat. 3 Chinese laborers died for every 2 miles of track that they built. The answer is 90%. This is the celebration day in 1865, the Transcontinental Railroad. Do you see any Chinese workers? Well, there aren't any. There certainly aren't any because they were not invited. It is not too late to recognize them. So the Golden Spike Museum in Utah, they just recognize the Chinese now on their website. Instead of 256 years, this is 157 years that now they're recognized. Not bad. It's never too late to recognize.
Yeah, that's so I just want to chime in. This is
Yeah,
Sasha.
go ahead. Yeah.
So there's a Chinese American photographer that recreated this photo with Chinese Americans. His name is 𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃. He died, I think, last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, this photo resurfaced on the news as a side-by-side comparison.
So he drew them in, or?
No, he actually recreated the scene with descendants of the Chinese laborers.
Oh,
he gathered together, I think, almost 100 people and recreated the scene to commemorate the labor.
I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Yeah. If you just Google 𝗲𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗃, 𝗲𝗏𝗃𝗏, yeah, famous Asian American photographer.
Oh, thank you, Sasha from Seattle, now in New York. I appreciate that.
Hey, Jolene.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to add, you mentioned that it's never too late, and indeed it is never too late. But I think another reason why it's not too late is for the new generation of kids and children who are now learning about people that their parents and older people didn't learn about. I think that it will help them as they kind of navigate through their life, especially when it comes to meeting people from different backgrounds, if they really start to learn about the history of these people that they're meeting.
Exactly. I think this is my last question here. So all of you know that the Japanese Americans were incarcerated, Executive 9066. But how many of you learned about the 442 in school? How many of you learned about the 442? And go ahead and put it in the chat if you, nope. Okay. These Japanese folks, Japanese Americans, 2/3, I believe it was 2/3 were Japanese Americans. They were removed from their homes, were in horse stalls, and there's fencing around them. And then the guards were pointing guns at them. So they were told, oh, it's for your protection, but the guns were at them. So something to think about. Here's a picture of when the Japanese Americans had to leave their homes. This is what happened to a number of them, where their places were broken into and ransacked and stolen from and destroyed. U.S. history we were not taught. The 442 was a Japanese American battalion. It was Japanese Americans from the mainland and then also from Hawaii, and they're called Buddha heads, or back in the day. It was the most decorated. So for them to not be known is uncool. So here are the 442. These guys, I believe they are all passed now. There are videos, and I actually on my website, I do have a lot of information about this highly decorated team. And there are stories facing the mountain. So he wrote Facing the Mountain, and this talks about with the Hawaiian Japanese Americans and the mainland Japanese Americans and how they worked together and became the strongest team.
Author was Daniel James Brown.
Thank you for that. This is Fusa Takahashi. And then so Aiko and 𝗔𝗀𝗋𝗿, these are three ladies who were incarcerated, and they fought for 15 years to get that stamp that we saw earlier here. And this is to recognize Go for Broke. That was the motto for the 442, and to let other people know about it, because as you know, all you are rather educated and didn't learn about it. I didn't learn about it either. This is the lady who this was her baby to get that stamp gone, and this is in her lap, and then she died.
In the last couple of days, Biden has designated another internment camp as a national heritage site or whatnot. It's near Fort Hale, Colorado, just in the last day or two.
Oh, I didn't know that. Can you put a link in the chat, please? Thank you. But the redress for the U.S. Reagan acknowledged that it was a wrongdoing, that Americans who are Japanese should not have been incarcerated. So that was in 1988. That is, instead of the 156 years, it was 44 years for that recognition. And by the way, there's a number of podcasts that are talking about the reparations and how JACL, Japanese American Citizens League, are helping Black Americans with reparations and how to approach that. And it's a neat story of how thousands of Japanese Americans, older than my mom, who's on the call here, who told their stories. And for Japanese to talk about that time is very rare. So it was a big deal to hear all these voices. And the 𝗔𝗀𝗋 project, 𝗔𝗀𝗋.org, they have many voices if you're curious to hear some of these voices of what they went through. A lot of people did not know about some of these basic things with Asians contributing to U.S. history. Let's hear from a few people what it was like. Can we hear from some non-white people about what it was like to not have role models?
Formal introduction. I'm Brooke. I'm 18. So I just graduated high school. I'm in college now, if it isn't obvious by my dorm. And I went to a predominantly white school throughout my entire life. I think the statistic for my district was probably about 5 to 10% Asian, if that. And it was very ostracizing having to grow up without very many people looking like you. And especially the statistics were especially abysmal for the staff and like the teachers specifically. I had 2 or 3 Asian teachers in the entire high school, and our high school had 800 kids. So if that, checks out at all. And it was very alienating to have to, go through life and have so many like negative experiences that come with like being Asian, like post 2020 with COVID, and even in elementary school when people would say, some not so nice things for like go back to your own country, like even things as simple as like, oh, where are you from? It depends on your tone, because that can sound very alienating. I apologize for reusing the same word, but I don't really have another way to describe it. It makes me feel foreign. It makes me feel othered. And not having anybody anywhere else, because I didn't have an Asian teacher at my school at all, I don't think, until high school maybe anyway. And so in elementary school, middle school, especially in those formative years when you're trying to form your own identity, not having somebody who looks similar to you, maybe not even similar, but just has a similar experience, it's definitely difficult to come to terms with your own identity. I met Jolene at a very convenient time because the listening session that I did with our district, we got a diversity director for a district, for context, about 2 years ago. And I met Jolene at the listening session. And that was right about when I started to find my voice. And I found that all the other Asian kids there had the same experience, but no one wanted to speak up about it because, again, there was a continuous cycle of nobody wanting to speak up for fear of being further ostracized, further alienated. left alone to your own resources, because, you know, I've had negative experiences with some of my teachers not even doing anything when there's a clear issue with people weaponizing their whiteness against me. And so I think,
Brooke, can you share any examples of that?
Yeah, sure. I remember in 5th grade, some kid, there was a couple of things in 5th grade. I think a lot of the kids would, you know, squint their eyes out at me, and they'd be like, oh, well, your eyes don't look fully pulled back, so you're not Korean. And I am Korean, by the way, if that, for context. And I felt like that was like very, very rude and disrespectful, because I mean, I am Korean, and I know that I don't speak Korean. My mom doesn't speak Korean, but she is like, so it felt, I already had issues with my identity, and that furthered it. Like people saying like, oh, you're not Korean. Like that was very much an issue for me, because obviously like I'm what, how old are you in 5th grade? 10, 11. And people are telling you that you're not what you are, because, you know, race and ethnicity is a core part of your identity, and you have to accept that in order to, like, you know, fully come into yourself. And when I would go to my teacher, she'd just be like, okay, like, what can we do about it? And, you know, that's the question that I was asking. I was curious, you know, what can we do about it? And things like that would happen, you know, all the time. And I get that those are microaggressions. And I don't know, I've been privileged enough to not actually experience any macroaggressions, but still the microaggressions would build up, and they become like over time the weight of a macroaggression, if that makes any sense. Like it would build up over time, because it feels like, again, with no teachers that are Asian, nobody understands, or nobody wants to understand, to put in the effort to be like, hey, like I got you, you know? And so that was something that was definitely troublesome. And that's why it took me until I was, you know, 16, 17 to fully begin to be like, hey, like I can speak up about this, and I can appreciate myself. I can start to love myself for being Asian, and, you know, among the rest of the parts of my identity.
Can you share what some of the responses were from teachers if you talked to them?
Yeah. I remember junior year, I had this teacher, and he was not responsive at all. And actually, in fact, he was the opposite. Everything that I ever said about like, hey, that comment was insensitive, like maybe let's not say that, or let's not do that, or let's not act like this. He would kind of just say, like, give off the boo-hoo type of, you know, cry about it type of expression. And my teacher, it was a white man, and it was very like, wow, you're a fully grown man, and you're telling me and some of my other Asian friends like that we're wrong for like being upset about something that's clearly like a societal issue, it's a systemic issue. It was very frustrating. You know, we would go to our principal. We had a lot of confrontations with our deans of the school, and like our principal, and nothing ever really got done. But it kind of just like showed, like, again, there's so little representation that you can barely even get like your voice out without being immediately shot down.
Well, a quick comment, and Brooke, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate your candor and your anguish about this experience. It's a wonderful thing. I'm reminded of a time in college when I took a class. It's a graduate class in a technical subject, doesn't matter what it was. The professor was Chinese, and there were 25 students in the class. 23 of them were Asian. And looking back on that experience, one of the things that I find remarkable is that I felt like I was perfectly, I don't know, I could use the word entitled or whatnot, but I didn't have any sense of otherness at all. I just knew as a white guy that the system was going to work for me, even though practically everyone in that class, including the instructor, was Asian. And, you know, maybe Kevin can follow up on this, but I have to just wonder if that's an utterly foreign experience for Asian students, Black students, etc.
Anyone?
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand the question as far as I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Brooke. As far as my experience, what would the question to me be? Because I think it's a great question.
You know, I mentioned this in one of the last meetings I was able to attend about Jesse Jackson feeling afraid of Black men when he was alone at night. And I'm looking back at this now and wondering, was I missing something in this class? Being, you know, one of two white people in the room and just feeling like I was completely entitled and comfortable with being treated fairly, where I was in an obvious tiny majority of the people who were in the classroom. And I don't know, I just have to wonder.
Well, one thing strikes me about what you said, and it kind of reminds me of what I've known white people who will say, hey, I went to Africa, or I went to this event where I was in the minority and there were all these Africans around and all these Chinese people around, and they're kind of patting them, not that you're doing this, but they're patting themselves on the back because they had this diversity experience, but it's a temporary reality, because all you needed to do was walk out the door and out the college, and you were back in your dominant culture. So you always know that even when, like I tell a white person, you know, yeah, you can go to a certain restaurant, you can go to a certain neighborhood, you can go to a certain country, but you can always go back to being white, and you can always go back to that comfort zone. I can't do that. You know, I can't change the color of my skin. I just spent the last 4 days in Idaho. Okay. And admittedly, I guess I wasn't in a big city, but I did not see another Black person there. At the hotel, at the town, at the Walmart. I mean, I went several places. Now, I saw a few Asian people and some other people. I'm not quite sure what their background was. They definitely weren't white. But I would say pretty much 99.8% of the people I saw were white. Now, I didn't feel particularly uncomfortable or anything like that, but I'm thinking to myself, they're feeling way more comfortable than I am with those kinds of numbers.
Yeah, that's basically my point. Yeah. You're reminding me that, you know, I've been to a number of different church and other kinds of religious services in my time. And I have to say, by far, the most diverse and apparently comfortable with the diversity was when I went to some Friday prayers with the Muslim students at the University of Washington. I mean, they've got everything, and it just seems natural to them. With one exception, which is they segregate the men and women. But even the women were openly pissed off about that, which I thought was kind of healthy.
And by the way, if anybody else wants to talk, particularly non-Asians, about their experience not seeing people reflected, that would be great. But first, Brooke, so can you tell me what you did after that session? I saw you, and you saw that there were other Asians out there that felt the same way. What did you do about it? You're stepping into your power. So what did you do?
Well, we started the first Asian Student Alliance at our school. So we made a club out of the Asian students that were there at the listening session. Oh, wait, does everyone know what a listening session, like what I'm referring to? So, okay, sorry. So let me give some context. So basically, during Asian Heritage Month, diversity director had asked for some help with advertising, and I headlined the advertising. And so basically a listening session in our district was defined as it was on Zoom, but like a group meeting open to any and all. But the focus was like, for the Asian American Heritage Month listening session, Asians and Asian Americans were the only people who were allowed to speak. So it was basically, and our director actually calls it a brave space. It was a brave space for Asians to be able to speak up and for everyone else to listen. And there was no room for questions from non-Asian people. There was no room for like heckling comments. And it was really just like a space to be able to open up about our feelings and thoughts about being Asian. Now, our listening session was specifically post the Atlanta shooting. So that was a reactionary listening session. And we mostly focused on like how that made us think about what it means to be Asian. But anyway, back to what we did after the listening session. So we started a club and we got together. It was 7 main students. We were all juniors at this time. And we created a bunch of videos, educational videos, celebrations and classes in our classes for Asian Heritage Month. And we all made a commitment to bring up to our teachers that, hey, like May is Asian Heritage Month. Like, let's be inclusive. Let's do things. And it was I thought it was really successful. Our district's Facebook page had a lot of great reviews around that time because it was all student-led educational videos, infographics, screencasts, live presentations, etc. And we were able to complete our first of many Asian Heritage Month celebrations. So from there, you know, the leaders of the club, the Asian Student Alliance, we worked throughout the summer to create more content to post regularly via the social media. And it kind of left off there because this was senior year, so a lot of us were very busy. But we were definitely able to recreate a similar type of environment for May 2022. And I thought it was really, really cool. And we got a lot more people to participate this year, which is really awesome.
So Brooke started the Asian Club and you were president of the BSU, the Black Club. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I am half Korean, half Black. And so I felt that it would be cool to be able to see like how involved I could get into like both of my communities, because obviously they're both part of my identity.
So any thoughts for the rest of you hearing Brooke share?
Hi, everybody. Brooke, I just wanted to commend you for your bravery, and I look forward to connecting with you and learning from you how you created this safe space for Asian people. Thank you. That's it.
I think also with the DEI, with the new DEI person, I don't know, like in Tacoma, Vanna, if you have a DEI person, right? And it depends on the school district to even have a DEI person. And will that DEI person be proactive with Asians too? Can you think about, find that link so other people can watch that listening session? When I saw this listening session, I was crying. Every person who spoke, I was just like, oh my gosh. It was crying with joy as well as discuss, you know, what they are going through. And a number of their schools were 30% Asian. And for them to go through what they were going through now, 2022, not cool. Okay, Cristina, and then Holly.
I'm Cristina. I'm on the East Coast in Virginia, so it's 8:30 this evening. Brooke, I am really, really proud of you for standing up for yourself and starting those clubs, because even though you are just a year younger than my oldest child, I feel like you're very empowering, and she could benefit from this video that Jolene is recording tonight, because she needed that when she was growing up here in Newport News, when she graduated and experienced, you know, high school herself. And what you're experiencing, I think, even though I'm an 80s kid and a 90s teen, I also didn't, and I'm a second generation Filipino American, born in New Orleans, raised in Virginia Beach.
Oh, New Orleans.
New Orleans, yep, where the first Filipinos settled when they jumped off the Spanish galleon ship into, yeah. So I knew what you were talking about, Jolene. But yeah, so I was just gonna say, even though my daughter was in the very small minority of Asians in recent years, and you know, through her high school experience, it was the same for me growing up in Virginia Beach, predominantly white, beach resort town. I think change is coming. We are making the moves, and it takes students like you that are brave and have support to do what you're doing. So I commend you very highly. And I'm an educator. So I'm really, really proud of you, because I think there's so much potential for you in the future, no matter what you decide. So thank you for sharing.
Yep, second that. Holly?
You're super inspiring at such a young age. It's really cool to see that you're doing what you're doing and thriving at it. So this is a question, I guess, for Brooke and for Jolene, really for anybody. You're saying a DEI person. I'm guessing that means diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if that's like a normal thing to have at a high school. I am just barely starting to kind of helping out and working at the high school I went to. And I don't know if there is a person like that, and just wanted to get opinion and advice about maybe how to encourage the administration to have one, or find out what's already in place, because that seems really important and like a structure that would create more Brooks.
Brooke, do you have any ideas? And for the rest of you, have you heard about DEI in schools? Go ahead, Brooke.
Our district, I'm pretty sure, was like one of the first throughout, like at least the county that I live in. Like, I don't think anyone else in our district, in our county, has a district level diversity, equity, inclusion director. I didn't. Well, I met him in February 2021. He was hired in January 2021. Yeah, I live in Pennsylvania. I live in I went to school in Downingtown, if that's familiar to anyone. I don't think it's very common at all. Our district is very fortunate to have someone, and it is a one-man show. Unfortunately, he has a lot of volunteer committees, and a lot of the work is student-based. Not only because one man literally cannot do everything, it's received better if it's student-based, and I think that's what he's found. So I guess that's his like lasting piece of advice, is always like, students will get better reaction than like district employees, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know if it's very common.
Go ahead.
I work at a university, and I'm in New Jersey, just a few miles away from Manhattan. The school that I work for just implemented an inclusive leadership certification for all first-year students. So last week school started. All first-year students, several hundred of them, had to go through a day-long training of what it means to be an inclusive leader in business. These are business school students. And we make it about, not just about, this is a feel-good thing that you should be, good and fair to everyone, and, not have racist views. That's one thing. This is actually about profit. If you are an inclusive business, you will do better, because people who feel like they belong in an organization will produce more, they'll be happy, they'll take less sick days. And so it's all about, doing better business and succeeding. So we have that argument. But, study after study shows that inclusive organizations just outperform less inclusive ones. They're more creative, they're more innovative, and they lead to higher customer engagement. And because we live in a diverse society, a lot of people are looking to support inclusive organizations. I mean, anytime some news breaks out about, like a bakery not serving wedding cakes to a gay couple, those businesses fail. So the more inclusive you are, the better you are at your business. So, and I think this is going to be a growing trend.
Sasha, I cannot wait to follow that case study and to also share that school to make sure that the other schools, know about it, and all the people who are doing curriculum also kind of know about it too. That is so exciting.
Like Black History Month in February, I was hoping during the PTA, we have a PTA twice that month, that one of the events we hold some space to recognize API month. And I was shot down, and I brought this to their attention that when it was Black History Month, they spotlighted BLM, Black Lives Matter, and they put it together very quickly, like within 2 weeks. And it was a good production where they had kids talk about Black heroes, Black oppression, and why BLM matters. Well, when I proposed the same attention for API, they shot me down. One of them first said it was at the end of the school year. A Black person said that takes away from the BLM movement, and right now we really need to be backing the BLM as a unified front. A a lot of the Asians that were very silent. And afterwards, after this was at the general meeting where I was speaking in front of everybody. Afterwards in the social, I did approach a few of them and asked why they were silent, why they didn't back me up. And they really felt that that they didn't want to make waves. They didn't want their children to be punished. And they just wanted to fit in. They were just so desperate to fit in.
I got it done. I actually leaned on I think some of the Black leaders who had the vendors already to contact. So I kind of mimic off of that, and they gave me a few pointers on scripts, but it was trying to like put a package together with portfolios and the amount of money that would bring in and what wouldn't be needed, like electricities and tables, to really get the principal to approve and squeeze the month of May, just one event for API month amongst, I guess, I think, what were they celebrating? It was African American or something. I don't remember. It was something that was taking away from that attention. That's how it was done. And it's going to happen again this year because now it's just like robotic.
That is
I don't know if that what means, but all the calls have been made and the vendors know and they know what to expect. And so, yeah, it should happen every year now, but it took a lot of work to get that first one going.
Yeah. And Chi, can you share like how you got that to work? Because there was so much pushback and there are a lot of Asians at your school. Can you share a little bit of how did you find, why was it so important to do that? And how did you eventually get support? Because it was a struggle.
Yeah, so I got some recommendations from some of the people here, and I don't know who it is. Sorry, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Because I have mommy brain, I think that's what they call it. So I did try to like have a pool party. I invited other people of color, but they really didn't help because I was really asking the wrong people. But because I did that one event at my house, someone else heard about it. And I guess by hosting that little mooncake party or something, they thought I was serious. So they actually kind of like served me this way. Hey, here's the paperwork needed to do it. And that's how it was done. I didn't know who to ask because they never present themselves on who actually gets things done and how things work at the ISD level.
Yeah. So that was such a big victory moment. I mean, being in Texas, actually, there's a lot of Vietnamese in Texas, but just, so I'll put in the resources, I'll put the video that Chi and I did to hear his story. And now.
Yeah, I was trying to listen in to see what the tone of this meeting is. But I did want to say just, I didn't get the help that I thought I was going to get from people that I thought was going to help me, just so you know. It came from an unlikely source. So I was very surprised. So it was a very interesting experience, who the allies are, once you kind of show some credibility. But that's what it took.
Yeah, well, it took persistence too. And I mean, as I think about when we talked, whatever a year or 2 years ago, and Sasha was on the call too.
Yeah.
There was also Vicky, who's a teacher, who was there, and we were just so mad that this was happening to you, and that you didn't get support, and then you made it happen. So it's a victory. So it's so exciting. Anyways, Chi, thank you for sharing, and also for my story in terms of growing up in 𝗏𝗏𝗱. There were a few Asians, I think in my class. There were like there's 90 people or something. I think there was 5 in my class, like not classroom, but class, I think. But I didn't feel any particular type of bond. And I just wanted to read a couple of other why it's important. Not having Asian Americans seen in our curriculum sends a message. I'm invisible, that I don't matter. As the adoptive parent of a Vietnamese American son, I believe that it's important to his identity and self-esteem to include Asian Pacific studies in the curriculum. Most Asians, okay, Bruce Lee was the one person we knew. I mean, yeah, but it didn't do much for me. But it was kind of neat that my parents knew him. And 𝗔𝗀𝗋𝗋, I wasn't Trekkie, so I didn't know about him. Didn't know. I think he's a genius now, and he's such a huge advocate. I encourage you all to follow 𝗔𝗀𝗋𝗋. He is he's a big deal and making massive progress, and he has a book too. I'm Japanese, Chinese, and Swedish, 4th generation in America. So 𝗲𝗏𝗋𝗋 here in Seattle, she was a news reporter for 35 years. I met her when I was 5 at the 𝗏𝗏𝗱𝗏 festival. and I saw her every year, and she's just a nice person overall. And, I didn't put two and two together until a couple years ago saying, oh, wait a minute, I do videos all the time. I'm a reporter. I didn't quite put that together until 35 years later or so. So she was, I guess, the one Asian, I think, that I thought of as kind of somebody who's a leader. I had a couple of teachers, but one was kind of a jerk and the other one was kind of funny, but I didn't feel any kind of connection or anything with them. And then 𝗔𝗀𝗋𝗿𝗂𝗰 Moana. So this is the first time that I felt represented in a movie, and this is 2016. Like I felt like, oh my gosh, that's me. And it was so inspiring. I saw this with my parents not too long ago. So it does matter. If I saw Moana a long time ago, would have made a difference. And I talked to a halfy guy, mixed guy, and he's younger, and he says, oh, Jason Momoa, that was his go-to guy, because he's a halfy also. And so he found all this strength in him. And there was a couple other role models out there in Hollywood to look to. Kelly Marie Tran. So here's she was just in Star Wars, the first person of color lead. And she got so much hate that she had to leave social media. But while she was there, and she's still doing things now, so she is somebody to look to for the younger generation. And Simu Liu, of course, is he's brilliant and on all the talk shows, and a great role model, very down to earth. So things are changing, but it is important to have role models. I just saw this today. So David Liu from the Hyphen, his organization is Hyphen. So he posted this, what this means to have quantum leap. I don't know if you all remember the TV show Quantum Leap. I remember it, but I never saw it. So he's like, oh, it's the best of all time. And now to have an Asian lead in this, it's a big deal. And he's so pleased because he is a father now. Things are changing, but not soon enough. And that doesn't mean also that Asians aren't being attacked nonstop. So yes, there are some good things happening, but there are still a ton of bad things that are violently happening. So here is the US population. So 60% white, 18% Hispanic, Black, 12%, and 6% Asian. So 60% white, and in 2045, it's going to be less than 50% white. As we think about making these changes to our education, so demographics are changing. And for fun here, I just put up here what are the most diverse states. You might be surprised that Texas is one of them, and Washington is not bad, which is strange. 55% in Washington state. Burmese. The biggest Burmese population is in Texas, by the way. So there's a lot of interesting facts that we don't know about. And even I remember I had Rob, who's from Nebraska and the cornfields, and he's never seen an Asian really outside of me. But they are places, right? But just not where he's going. He's a cowboy dancer, line dancer guy. And this is a really neat tool, AAPI data. And it shows where all the Asian populations are. So here I did the Hmong population. So you can look, so how this matters to you is, hey, in your area, who are the different demographics? Maybe I want to sell to them. Maybe I need to make different marketing for your education. Maybe you need a tailor. Okay, there's more of a Hmong community. Well, let's do Hmong education. So there are a lot of neat tools out there, so you can be more effective whether you are doing business or other. This is where all the Asians are mostly in Hawaii, 39%, California, 15%, New Jersey, 10%, Nevada, New York, Washington. And by the way, Nevada is called the 9th island of Hawaii because there's so many Hawaiians there. Now let's start talking about education. So we know how important it is. Let's now talk about books. So Cristina, do you want to talk a little bit about books and what you're seeing? There's a number of banned books and why that matters, or what you're seeing or what you're doing.
How many of you are frequent library users? Visit your library, borrow books, read? Because if you are, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And if not, then I have to give you more information. But it looks like over nearly half of you raised your hands. So then that tells me if I tell you that on Sunday, Banned Books Week begins, you might have an idea. Thumbs up, yes. Thumbs down, no. Kinda, okay. Okay, so that tells me where you all stand. So my background again, I'm actually a library media specialist. I'm a teacher librarian. What's that? You know, your school librarian, that would be me. What the teacher, the librarian, the teacher that sees all of your kids in school, that would be me. So Banned Books Week, that I mentioned is coming up. It starts on Sunday, and we're talking about book banning. And that's a form of censorship when private individuals, government officials, or organizations, you pretty much challenge the books in the library. Recently, you might have heard about it in the news, so you might be aware. So that's what I'm talking about. And every year, annually, the American Library Association, which is the oldest and largest and the world's largest library association, started this, I don't remember how long ago, but the ALA has been around since the 1800s. So, and challenging books have been around, but there's been like an uptick lately. So again, so here's the dates. Every book ban leaves a hole in a child's learning. So definitely, why is that important? And I'm going to pause that real quick. It relates to how now is a dangerous time, because for readers and public servants, those that serve, you know, people that come to the public libraries most especially, libraries provide access to your reading materials, and the libraries are free. Readers, particularly the students, are losing access to critical information, and librarians and teachers are under attack just for doing their jobs. So that's what we're talking about. And I want to show you right here in the video, but let me share. Oh, look at this statistic right here. 2021, 1,597 books were affected. This is just last year by censorship attempts. There's a video, a PBS video right here. In that slide, you'll see just an interview with, I think the CEO of PEN America. And she talks about, you know, any of your questions about what's happening, why is it happening, the questions are asked in that video, and it's about 6 minutes. But I wasn't going to show you that. I was just going to show you a really simple clip of her talking about what book banning is to her, and how they're not just a challenge in the school system or a library, but there's also legislation being introduced that affects the availability of these books all over the state and in every school in the library. And I thought that was really important to think about and know. I was able to do this quickly because ALA already has these slides pre-made. So when I said I could go ahead and make a quick presentation based on it, they have this to share. I'll show you the resources at the end of this, because they want to put this information out there. They want you to know what this is about, and so that you're aware. Who initiates it? Mainly parents. Some patrons, students 1%. Where? Mainly school libraries. It hasn't happened to me. I have had parents and students question some books, but not to the level where we actually have to go through. There's a very lengthy process to actually withdraw books from libraries at schools. So I haven't had to go there with myself and my students at my schools. And for those that aren't in the field of library, there is an Office for Intellectual Freedom, and they are located in Washington, D.C. So they tracked 729 challenges. And this is just a breakdown of what types of materials were challenge. So you see mainly books, graphic novels, and texts. And then we have programs, displays, films, and others. And you can see the asterisk right here, just talking about specifically what those other were, like social media, pamphlets, student publications, reading lists. And so that's what's being censored. The reasons for these challenges, and you can see through like this word art right here, and take a look, make note right here. It says each word and phrase in this graphic is actually cited from 2021 censorship reports. So this is what people were saying about the material that they wanted removed. Sexually explicit, LGBTQIA, obscene, woke, profanity, critical race theory. You're probably looking at it with me. There's a lot of words. They just took them directly from those the paperwork. And in that video, if you actually look at it, and I can put the link in the chat in a little bit, it's mainly the LGBTQIA and books that deal with race that are being censored or they're trying to ban. So for last year, this is a list, this is the first 5 of the most challenged books of 2021. And you can see it's Genderqueer, Lawn Boy, All Boys Aren't Blue, Out of Darkness, The Hate You Give, that was a movie, which we actually like. And we have some of these books in my house. And we already talked about that statistic right there, 729 challenges. That's the top 10. Let's go to the other half. The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, Me and Earl and the Dying Girl. I believe that was also a movie. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, This Book is Gay, and Me Beyond Magenta. So again, you can see what books are actually being banned or they're trying to ban. And I just reminded you that this banned books week, read a banned book. There are things you can do. Read those books, see what the challenges are about, because there's a reason why those books are in the library. This one says individuals should be trusted to make their own decisions about what to read. Also, Unite Against Book Bans, that is an affiliate. This is an actual organization that works with American Library Association. So these are also graphics to share. So if any of you are reading books and people want to challenge it, you are free to get those these social media graphics from there. And it's in my resources again. So I just want to touch on that. Don't let other parents tell you what your child can read. What do librarians do? I put this graphic up here because when I ask you if you have experience going to the library, I don't know if people actually know what teacher librarians do, which is what I do. So these are the infographics, and I'm just mentioning it because I actually do teach. I am a certified teacher and a library media specialist. I'm a former classroom teacher. I've spent most of my time in elementary, and I just love books, and it marries technology and books and teaching. So I got the endorsement to be the school librarian. What I want to say is that librarians support intellectual freedom. So we believe that students and people have the right to read what it is they want. And we take a lot of time doing our own research, evaluating books for our collections, whether it's, there's 4 different types of librarians. You have school librarians like me. You have librarians that are special librarians, which we don't talk about often, but they work at like museums or research centers or hospitals. Those are special libraries. And then we have academic librarians, and they're the ones in colleges and universities. And then we have public librarians, so your local public library. So we do the same thing, different methods, but our training is similar, other than I have the background in teaching. when I say that, when we curate our resources, when we are given a budget to get the print and digital materials, we make sure that all of it is accurate. It meets the needs of our students, our patrons. We look at the best of the best. So, it's like we're the experts in the field of the book. So I just wanted to point that out for those of you who think, which I hear sometimes, that they think that a librarian is just somebody who will take your book and scan it and then you're out the door. We do a lot more than that. When you go to a public library, your actual librarian is not the page that checks you out at the desk or the person that's shelving the books. Those are pretty much everybody's assistants. I use my own students for that. And what can you do? You can fight censorship. You can keep books in the library. Oh, wait, what was the last one that I put? And promote the freedom to read. What else can you do? Get involved with the American Library Association's Banned Books Week. We're almost at the end of this short little presentation. There are links that I can share with you. If you're like, there's a whole list. ALA has a whole list. They have a website. Join the fight with United Against Book Bans. Same thing. They are like organizations, publishers, library organizations, ALA, these people working together to fix the censorship with books. And then there's also Support the Freedom to Read Foundation. They're a nonprofit organization. So there's organizations out there that are fighting back the censorship. And this is what I'm talking about. This is just, no, this is where I got the information, but let's go to the next one. Right here, the additional resources. So these are the links I mentioned. If you're like, what is Banned Books Week about? What can I do? How can I promote and share it? There's the link. And I mentioned the Office for Intellectual Freedom in DC. There they are. They also work with Public Policy and Advocacy Office. We have a Library Bill of Rights. Here's the organization that I mentioned, Freedom to Read Foundation. PEN America, I think they're an organization founded in 1922. They have centers worldwide. They also ensure that people everywhere have the freedom to create literature, convey their info and ideas, express their views, and have people have access to these views, ideas, and different literatures. So everybody's working together, especially through Unite Against Banned Books.
Great. Well, I think that is so helpful, and it's great to hear of these resources. I explored some of these resources today, and they're so beautiful. They have all these different toolkits where you as a parent, you as a teacher, you as a other person, what you can do when people say this or that. And there's things that are postable, and there's talking points. And so I do encourage those of you who are interested in this to look, start with the ALA and then kind of go from there, because there's just massive amounts of neat information. Thank you, Cristina. That was really helpful. So we talked about the banned books. Now let's talk about all the banning of education when they talk about race or gender. So here's just a quick chart of green is no restriction. Light blue is banned. They have banned, and I'll show you what banning looks like, what the language looks like. There's a minute I was going to play about CRT, critical race theory, because a lot of people don't know what it is. It really is just talking about race plays into it, and it's part of a system. So this is Kimberly Crenshaw, and she is one of the founders of the theory, also intersectionality. So I'll have a lot of links to that. And this is one of my favorite series, Beyond the Scenes. This is Roy Wood Jr. and discovered him from the Trevor Noah Daily Show. He's funny, but this program, they always take one, like voting suppression, and they talk about it. Black hair, they talk about it. So they just do a great job of explaining what's behind it. Here's some examples. I'm just gonna read a couple of you. National push for harmful restrictions is growing. A Texas bill seeks to remove requirements to teach about slavery, the KKK, Native American history, writings of MLK. In Louisiana and Ohio, vaguely worded bills sought to censor teachers from discussing divisive concepts. So there's all these different bans on what you can and cannot talk about. This is a data sheet that talks about executive orders saying prohibits public K through 12 schools from promoting or endorsing certain ideas related to race, color, religion, sex, or ethnicity, national origin. So these are the same types of groups who are like, hey, we can't talk about the Holocaust. It's unbalanced. What about the other side? Here are seven states that have executive orders. And then there are also 20 new laws as of mostly 2021. These are 20 new laws banning, again, talk of race. And a lot of them say CRT when CRT is not being introduced to schools at college level. So they're banning something that's not even there. And then there were from a year and a half, so January 2021 till now, there were 192 proposals to laws that are talking about race. Luckily, they didn't all go through yet. And here's a simple picture. So that's the banning of talking about race. And then here's the trying to get Asian American studies into legislation. And when we say Asian American studies, it's US history, including Asian American stories and history, like we talked about, the Chinese Exclusion Act, Filipinos. So green is passed. So there are, I believe there's 9 states now, and yellow is pending. Notice Washington State is not there. And this is more of a complicated one. And I'm going to share with you a couple of videos that really are fantastic for explaining how you get a law passed and what the challenges are. And this is from a study, which for some of the nerdy people out there, it's really interesting. New York schools, they have a curriculum that's going to be going very soon. The Committee 100 is a Chinese American organization. Gary Locke, our past governor, Gary Locke, the first Chinese governor, at least of our state, is the head of it. And so that's who did this particular research. K through 12 studies often only mention Illinois, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. In fact, 18 states currently require AAPI studies. 7 states have codified requirements in states. So there's different ways. We hear that there are 9 states with a law that specifically talks about Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander studies. But there actually are more, but it's put together in a different way. It's not codified like that. This will be recorded, but this is the Russell Tzang. He's a professor, and he does the Stop Asian Hate, and has the 6 strategies of how important it is to get these passed, but how to do it. And by the way, the education is not so people can become more informed about Asians. Yes, that is definitely important, but it's more Asians are being bullied like nobody's business. And so it's more framed in that framework. If other people know, hey, Asians belong here too, and Asians have made contributions, and here we're seeing Asians, we're here a long time, then the idea is to be more accepted that way, because bullying is a huge factor. And so when they frame it like that, it is also more helpful. Here is information of how to share why this is important. And so I just grabbed this. You don't need to read this, but there are toolkits for parents and teachers and talking points. So you can just boom. Oh, what do you say when somebody says this? These websites are really helpful for trying to educate your fellow parents and teachers. So we're going to hear from this teacher and also representative.
I'm a freshman legislator from the state of Nevada. And in my real life, I'm a teacher. And one thing that I was always taught as a teacher when I started 25 years ago is that the literature, as well as textbooks that we choose, should be both a window as well as a mirror. It should be a mirror to reflect our students as well as a window into a different world. So that way they become much more aware of things. And I think what Governor Locke had brought up is such a good point. We need to be aware that our history is varied, and we need to be aware of Manzanar. For example, if you've never had a chance to read Farewell to Manzanar, please do so. I'm an English teacher, so I get a chance to teach that. We need to not only be aware of our history, but we also need to be aware that it's not always something that's we should celebrate. It's something that we should be aware of, so we do not go there again. I brought forward Assembly Bill 261 last session, both because of my world as a teacher, but more importantly, because I had groups of students from our state who came forward and said that they wanted this. The students would not be helped by it because 4 of the students were on their road to graduate that year, and 2 more had already graduated, and 1 was a junior. And yet they still were very much passionate about how important it is that their education be a reflection of the society we live in. And I can still remember Mia, who was a junior at the time. She's now going to be a freshman. I think she's going to Pacific next year. And Mia stood up during the session and during the committee hearing and said that she was embarrassed about her history because she'd never heard about it in her history classes as an 8th grader. It was not until she was an 11th grader that she had somebody that looked like her that taught her. And so she finally had a chance to be able to start seeing some other literature. In this case, it happened to be Latina literature. But I think that that is the most important message, is that we need to empower our students as well as our community to realize that we have varied points of view. It's important that we embrace all of them and have a chance to have those conversations. I'm more than happy to discuss a little bit more about my bill, because really it's just one step of a very long process where the literature, as well as the history textbooks and the science textbooks, must take into account more than one point of view. And that's really at this time where the bill is going. We are in discussions about extending more and more of that into requiring classes, but those are at this time discussions because of some other things that are going on in our state. More than happy to answer some questions and engage in further discussion, and also looking forward to hearing from others. Thank you again for this opportunity.
And we're going to hear
Thank you,
from
Natha. We'll
another
get back
person
to
too.
some of the contents of your bill in a moment, but now let's hear from Barbara Ann Fenton-Fung, the Rhode Island State Representative. Barbara?
Oh, thanks so much, Stuart. And thanks to the Committee 100, Ambassador Locke. We were joking earlier. I think my husband and I are the first husband-wife team on a C100 webinar. Many of you will know my husband, Alan Fung, was a mayor up here in Rhode Island for 12 years and is now running for Congress. So yes, there, as you see the name, there is the relation there. So I'm happy to talk about how we push through House Bill number is called 7272A. We were trying to grab an 8 for lucky numbers. It just never worked out when we were getting those house numbers assigned. It is one thing I'd like to talk about, because I second everything that Natha said, especially when it comes from an education standpoint. By trade, I work in healthcare. I've taught at the college level, but never in this realm. I taught things like neuroanatomy, but the principles are the same. You want to make sure that your world is being reflected and accurately and holistically. But when we get to the actual legislating, it's a very cutthroat process. Politics is not a spectator sport. And if there's one thing I can say to hammer home tonight is that it requires the energy and engagement of many, many different groups in order not only to have your bill filed, but to get attention. And then in most legislatures across the state, across the country, it has to pass not only the House, but also the Senate. And so how did we in Rhode Island become the 4th state to get this across the finish line when there has never been an Asian American legislator in the House or the Senate? I'll say it right now, you need to have a lot of strong allies. Obviously, myself being married to the first Asian American everything here in Rhode Island, from a government standpoint, I'm very easily accessible, and I have great relations with not only the Rhode Island Association of Chinese Americans, but national organizations like UCA, like C100, Lonnie out of New York, Make Us Visible nationwide. There were lots of different groups that came forward and helped us push the importance of this bill. Again, when you don't have any Asian Americans in your legislature, sometimes you can say, oh, are you putting this bill in for a constituent? That's fine, like, okay. But I needed to build on the momentum of a year prior. We had passed education requirements telling the African American, Black American story. And I knew if we didn't get this going soon, it would be a harder and harder bill to get through over the next few years. there's nothing like a little bit of pressure to get things going in politics. So I engaged on the Senate side. A wonderful ally, her name is State Senator 𝗔𝗀𝗃𝗁. She has a ton of Asian Americans in her city that she represents. And the important thing is we were both on the education committees in our chambers. And so we were able to have a much bigger voice. So when you're looking for people to sponsor these bills, make sure they actually sit on the education committee. You'll have a much easier time moving this forward. And then there were certain things that came up along the way that were just kind of funny. The first time this bill was scheduled to be heard was actually right in the middle of Chinese New Year. And I had to go to the chairman and I had to go to the speaker. And I was like, guys, it's hard to get everybody to come and testify because this is a really important holiday. And just little things like that, they didn't understand. They're like, oh, well, can't they just come up? You know, I was like, this is a deeply religious holiday. And we want to make sure that people can come and engage. So we had to move the starting point forward a little bit. And so there were little bits along the way that actually educated a lot of members of our chamber who, like Ambassador Locke had said earlier, had never heard of the Chinese Exclusion Act. I had state legislators who were history teachers themselves. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I've heard of it, but we don't teach it, or anything about the Japanese American internment during World War II. So it was kind of an education session also for fellow state legislators. And it took a lot of work and a lot of local engagement and a lot of continued pressure to make sure this bill kept going through. In Rhode Island, we have it's a very small population of Asian Americans.
So she's going to say 3%. What are your thoughts about what has been said here? Interesting, not interesting? Like, this is a teacher who became a politician. And the woman who's talking right now, she's a Republican. And I guess studying this a little bit, it is incredible because they share with you, here are all the bans against education, talking about race or gender. And then here we're trying to promote it. The ways you go about it are very different depending on your demographics, and how people are going about it is, oh, so you have Black education here. Okay, well, let's add in Latinx and Asian. And so even though there were so many bans out there, there is opportunity. I thought this is very hopeful. This is incredible presentation in full to talk about how they're going about it and how they build allyship. And getting the bill passed is one thing, but that's not funding at all. Then you have to get it funded. And then for the teachers to want to do this, you need to get salary points for them. They need to be paid for getting the training. So one of the 𝗔𝗀𝗃𝗁, who's the one of the websites, they're developing curriculum. They give free training because they want people to do it. And so they've trained 2,500 people. And a lot of the teachers don't know anything about Asian American history at all. And so they're not comfortable with it. So if you give them the training, then, okay, well, I was told to do it. And so, and you're taught by Asians. I mean, it is incredible what's happening here, but there is a big fight. One of our teachers in Empowered Asians, she was sharing with me all the doxing. So for the teachers, school board members, how they are being, bad things are happening to them, like on Facebook. People will call and leave messages and just all the different things. So there are a number of right arms that are against teachers. And so teachers and parents and school board members are under fire. And so to be aware of that. So we need to fight hard to get this through. And there are a number of programs who are doing this kind of work. Any thoughts?
I did a lot of research between like February and August for an internship that I did. I was telling Jolene about this earlier, but there are a lot of bills passed, and I have to find the website that like senators use to like log into specifically for them. But there's a lot of legislation that was actually already passed. Obviously, it takes a long time to enact. Like a lot of the legislation that I found, like in Tennessee, there's a 2022 bill. Sorry, I'm just reading off this document that I compiled last month. But a lot of the legislation was not specific to Asian Americans. It was just like ethnic studies in general. A lot of like this Tennessee bill that was passed in 2022 about like you need like 1 year of ethnic studies isn't going to be in effect until 2025, 2026. I thought that was kind of interesting how they were it takes that long to like, get the budget moving, because I know in Pennsylvania, which is one of the states that I think kept popping up for like not so good things happening on the infographics that you had been presenting, which I'm not surprised about. It's disappointing, but that's the state. But for Pennsylvania, during budget month, I know that the Republican lawmakers, instead of like trying to come together, well, not all of them, but a lot of the more right-wing conservative lawmakers were pushing out like anti-LGBTQ bill after anti-Asian bill after yada yada, like all of these very, very like pushing us back type bills to procrastinate getting the budget ready so they could actually start to like finance some of the bills that Pennsylvania was actually trying to pass for education. And so I think it's very like interesting that like I'm sure some of those statistics also had the influence of people just throwing in random bills just to be like, I don't know how else, like it sounds very juvenile to say annoying, but I think that's kind of what it is. What's been happening is very childish. It's very like, okay, let me be as divisive
Either way,
divisive as I possibly can, in a way to like not actually be able to fund some of these bills. Because again, some of these bills come from states, like I see a Rhode Island bill passed in 2021 about African American history specifically, Colorado, Washington State, New Mexico, Oregon. Some of these states that I really wouldn't expect to pass bills are passing bills that are quite progressive in the sense that like their General Assembly body is not very diverse at all. And so I think that's something to be like, the bills themselves being passed is something to be happy about. But it's definitely a process to get them, fully funded and enacted. So that's, I guess, something that the second woman who started speaking in the video, I'm sure, was trying to like get to, is like, it takes a lot to get things, rolling.
Yeah. And Brooke, if you can email me that source for the centers, that'd be great. This is exciting to me. I don't have the links of all the groups who are banning and harassing board members, et cetera. So there's that out there. That's why we need to be stronger to support the people making decisions. But this is more hopeful, I think. It is disappointing that Washington State is not there. I need to see what's going on with that. So I encourage you to look. I have this really long list of resources, but you can at least see where your state is at. And even if your state doesn't have anything, that doesn't mean that your school district isn't doing something. I think that Shoreline, where some of us are around, I think they are doing some curriculum of their own, even though it's not mandatory. So the JACL is being active in Shoreline. I do encourage you to go to some of these websites and download the little kits. It's like a 1-page or 2-page of how to respond.
I'm actually like really surprised that Washington State doesn't have anything passed. Blessed to have a pretty good history teacher. And I remember I went to Whitman Middle School over here in 8th grade. I had a U.S. history class. I had to take a U.S. history class pretty much for, the entire time I was there, and then also world history. But 8th grade, I had to take a local history class. And I remember everybody telling me, like, no, you have to take this class in order to graduate out of middle school. And that is where I learned all that I knew about the Asian American history and also Native American history as well. And it was actually one of my favorite classes ever. And our teacher did not shy away from the racism, the atrocities, of that happening to Asian Americans, all of like pretty much the history teachers I've had who were getting on the subject of teaching some part of Asian American history. I remember Mr. Mercado as an example. The first thing he had us do when it came to learning about World War II, he had us take out a piece of paper and he said, write down this number, write down this term, Executive Order 9066. That man made sure that number was engraved into our heads practically. And he actually flat out called them concentration camps.
So he used I don't want to say the word strong, but like, that's the only word that comes to my mind. He used very strong type of language, heavy type of language, so we would be able to understand just like how bad it really was. And so I kind of grew up under this impression that like, hey, my state is doing something, but to see that it isn't, it's astounding. And we, over here, we need to stop being like, our politicians need to stop being just like, let's hope this whole thing sorts itself out somehow. Like it has to stop.
Well, that is fantastic that you learned about Executive Order 9066. I didn't even know it until like a year ago, I think. So, and I'm Japanese, so that's hopeful. That's kind of what I had to say. And I do have a whole slew of CRT videos. To be clear, what is that? Because, the media, Fox says it's something, but it's actually not. And so, and I was just listening to Trevor Noah, of course, big fan of The Daily Show, and he was interviewing a Republican politician and talking about CRT, and so that was interesting too. But yeah, I encourage those videos because the banned book, CRT, it all kind of, well, I do want to encourage you to also listen to Brooke. I have 2 videos in the chat. I'll put on a resource page, but we do want to have more people like Brooke who find their power. We want to give them the tools to learn and to be a leader. And I think by also listening to Brooke and some of her colleagues, it is just so gut-wrenching, but empowering as well. To hear what these young women are going through now, or just a year ago, where they're youngsters, right? Yet you think that we have changed, right? And with so many Asians in their particular schools, but it's even worse. I mean, talking about like, pretending you don't use chopsticks because you're embarrassed because you don't want to be teased, and pretending like you don't know your Chinese. I mean, I don't know any language, but to pretend because you want to distance yourself from those Asians who are ostracized. And so it's really encouraging. Tomorrow, I put in the chat, Kevin and I are looking through cultural lenses. We are talking, we'll do a little bit of discussion, but I encourage you to invite other people to it because it's important. And we're doing it for the city of Shoreline, but everybody is welcome. It's a little bit more general and just the value of looking at perspectives. And I think it's a little bit entertaining. If there's nothing else to say, I thank you for attending, and it's great to see some new faces.